Hi, I'm Mimi Chan. Welcome to Culture Chat. Thanks for joining the conversation. Sheriff Mina of Orange County, Florida sat down to discuss his philosophy on law enforcement and what his hopes are for the community of Orlando. As a former chief of the Orlando City Department, he brings several years of experience to the job as the newly elected sheriff. We discuss officer-involved shootings, community outreach, and he shares a bit about his background of why he chooses to be in public service. As a reminder, my views on politics are my own and do not affect my position at work. Finally, please help support this podcast by sharing it and rating it. And if you'd like to support with a donation, you can become a patron of the show by visiting my website or patreon.com for as little as $1 per month. For comments or suggestions, email me at mimi@culturechatpodcast.com or reach out on social media at SifuMimiChan. Now, on with the show. Sheriff Mina, thank you so much for joining me on Culture Chat today.
Glad to be here.
Yes, it is an honor, and I am really excited to have a conversation about law enforcement.
Great.
Well, let's kind of start at the beginning. You pretty much started, I think, the Orlando Police Department in the early 90s and kind of worked your way up, ended up being the chief of the Orlando Police Department for quite a long time, and now we can see you here in the lovely green as our sheriff of Orlando Orange County. But what kind of initially got you started into law enforcement?
That's a great question. I get asked that a lot, and so I always point to two very distinct interactions with law enforcement when I was growing up. And one of the interactions, my mom and my brothers, we were involved in a traffic crash, and it was pretty traumatic to me. We had never been involved in something like that, and I remember the officer coming to the scene. He was extremely professional, showed us kindness and compassion. His uniform was immaculate, his car was clean, he gave us a ride home, and I knew, looking back now, I know that this was very mundane for him, but he knew that it wasn't the case for us. So he really took the time to show us some kindness and compassion. And then fast forwarding several years later, as a young teenager, I was stopped by the police, and that interaction was very different. And in that case, the officer who talked to me was unprofessional, not clean shaven. His uniform was a mess. He didn't take pride in his job, but more, I remembered the way he treated me, and he didn't treat me with dignity and respect. So those two interactions, mainly the first one, got me interested in law enforcement. And the second one really, when I became a law enforcement officer, I was like, you know what, I'm going to be like that first officer, not like that second officer. I'm going to remember how I felt when he was talking to me. And that's kind of what got me interested in law enforcement.
Okay, and what was that kind of journey like for you? Because as we discussed off air, my cousin, just even a few years ago, just joined the sheriff department, and I kind of got to see the paces that they put him through, and it was pretty intense. What was it like when you joined?
Well, I had joined the United States Army first, and I was a military police officer.
So you're already primed.
So yeah, it really made the transition from civilian life to law enforcement a little easier for me. But I remember, like we talked about, I remember being very, very excited. And the thing about this job, for me at least, I'm still excited to put on this uniform as I was the first day, and I love coming to work, love law enforcement, love being the sheriff, and it's been a great career.
Yeah, I actually do notice that a lot of people in law enforcement are former military. Is that just because it's a common transition when you kind of come out of there, you're like, what do I do next? And it just feels natural, or?
Right. So when I was with the Orlando Police Department, we hired probably 40% of former military veterans, and it's right in line at the sheriff's office. Right about 38% we're hiring people who have been in the military and veterans. And I think it is an easier transition, the discipline, the teamwork, the physical fitness, the mindset is already there, already ingrained in you. And we're talking about people, veterans, myself included, that really want to serve, continue to serve at our community, but on a local level.
Yeah, and
What was kind of the most challenging part for you during like the recruitment phase or your training days? Like what was one of the things that you're like, oh, I'm glad I don't have to do that anymore?
Well, probably the biggest challenge for me was I was raised in New Jersey, so when I came down here to apply for a job at the Orlando Police Department, I was not familiar with the people, with the area, so I was always, trying to find my way, and really didn't know too many people down here. So that was probably not knowing where you were, and was the most challenging part. And as you know, in law enforcement, you got to know where you are, you got to get there quickly.
Of course.
So that added a little bit of stress, but I picked it up.
Right. I thought you were going to say the humidity.
that is another factor.
Because I was like, oh, New Jersey to Orlando.
Yeah.
That's quite a transition, actually.
It is hot
so you
down
grew
there.
up in New Jersey, or
Yes.
okay?
Yeah.
And why did you pick Orlando?
So, going back to when I was in the military, I was stationed in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and the Orlando Police Department actually came up there to recruit. Something
Really?
they still do, something that the Orange County Sheriff's Office does. Knowing that military sometimes is a good foot in law enforcement, we hit all those military bases and Army posts. And so the Orlando Police Department came up there, and I was 21 at the time, and I said, yes, I will come to sunny Orlando, Florida, and become an Orlando police officer. So really didn't take too much talking into.
Right.
And as soon as I came down for some of the testing, I was like, yeah, I can definitely see myself being a police officer here.
Yeah, and you have done so, not, I guess successfully is the wrong word, because it's really public service, and it's just like day in, day out of kind of giving a piece of yourself all the time. I actually see that to be one of the most challenging things, where it's not a typical 9-to-5 job.
No.
You don't get to just kind of clock out, and I think it's hard to kind of separate some of the hardships that you do have to face. What has that kind of challenge when, in your earlier years of serving been like as just a regular police officer, not as the chief or as sheriff?
Yeah, so especially as a young officer, it could be a lot of long hours, a lot of shift work. You're working at night, you're working weekends and holidays, and I remember kind of coming to work like on a Friday night, knowing that the vast majority of this community was all going home for the weekend and having plans for the weekend. And although I loved my job, I remember that part being, it's kind of a little depressing that here I am at work while everyone's having a good time. But as you progress in law enforcement, you realize that that's why we signed up. We're here to keep people safe, and there has to be someone out there all the time.
Yeah. What was the hardest part in terms of moving up through the ranks? Because I'm not really familiar how that works. Like, you're just a police officer, you're like, I'm going to be the chief one day, or is it something that just kind of naturally progressed?
Yeah, so that's something that people ask all the time, and I just always wanted to be a cop, just a regular police officer. I always wanted to catch the bad guy, be the ones out there helping people, giving directions, and coming to save the day when necessary. Well, why, after being on for a few years, I had many mentors and friends telling me, John, you need to take the next test. You need to go to the next level. You can really, you're already a leader, an informal leader, but now, become a sergeant, become a lieutenant. You have that ability. And I started to believe them. I said, you know what, I think I can do that. And when I attained that first rank, I really liked it because I can affect a little bit more change. I had a whole squad of officers that I can direct to a certain area or to a certain problem. So all along, I kept, taking the next test, getting even more education and training and law enforcement experience, and continue to move up the ladder until one day I think I was a lieutenant at the time, and working directly for the chief of police at the time. So I got to see how the chief functioned on a day-to-day basis, the decisions that were made, the activities and the work that a chief had to do. And I said, I can do that job. I can see myself in that position, and if it happens, great. So I started working towards that goal, and again, leaned on a lot of those mentors. Like, okay, what else do I need to do? Is it more leadership classes? Is it a different type of job within law enforcement? And that helped me rise through the ranks. And then in April of 2014, the chief at the time, Chief Paul Rooney, recommended to Mayor Dyer that I think John Mina would be a good chief, and the mayor appointed me along with the city commissioners to be the 38th police chief in the city of Orlando.
Very nice. And I see, as a martial artist, and in our school, everything's very family. Like even the students, we consider them all part of the family. And in our martial world, we actually call each other that way, like older brother, younger sister, etc. And so I feel like a lot of different organizations, such as military and law enforcement, is very much a brother/sisterhood, and becomes this like unit, like you mentioned, having your first squad, like having people you're accountable for, must garner a big sense of responsibility. But I also see that everything's not always rosy and perfect. How do you keep like the morale up with not just your peers, but also with the people that you are responsible for and you're in charge of?
So, and I do talk about this a lot. The men and women in law enforcement, the deputies out there on the street, Orange County Sheriff's Office, they can't keep us all safe unless their needs are met. So it's very important as a leader to ensure that they're safe, that they have the best training, the best equipment, and the best leaders to help them get that mission solved. So one of the things that I preach is family first. And we have a large agency, and things happen, life happens. People have marital problems, they have financial problems. That someone will say, "Hey, I have to be with my kids today," and so I tell our supervisors and commanders that we need to make that happen. If we need to move the chess pieces around so that this deputy can go see his kids today, then let's make that happen. And those type of things keep morale up. And I also think keeping grounded and remembering that I walked in their shoes, and I can't forget that in my duties. And I tell officers and deputies this all the time, that their job is a lot harder than mine. And what I mean by that is, I have an entire staff. When I make a decision, I usually have the reports in front of me, the video, the audio. I have recommendations from my senior staff members, recommendations from legal. Oh, the officer, the deputy on the street doesn't have all that when they're making a split-second decision. Right. And that's why I tell them, their job is harder than mine. And so in my duties as leader, I try to remember that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I know that the transition must have been kind of interesting, and it's fairly new, going from a position where you're pretty much appointed to something that you're running for, like it's an elected position. And why did you choose to kind of make that switch? And then what was the election process like for you? Because that never seems very fun.
I don't think anyone really enjoys it. But so I was, chief of police for almost 5 years, loved working for Mayor Dyer and loved working for the city of Orlando. And I went through a lot of ups and downs by that agency, got a lot of great things accomplished. And I had always eyed maybe a larger agency or another challenge, because I knew that eventually at the Orlando Police Department my time would come to an end. So and part of that is letting the next group of young leaders move up, right, and always constantly getting better and improving, and a lot of that has to do with leadership change. And so I kind of kept my eye on the Orange County Sheriff's Office, knowing that now Mayor Demings, I've known him for 3 decades, and I would never dream against running against him. He, in my opinion, had done a fantastic job with the Orange County Sheriff's Office. So, but when he decided he was going to leave and run for mayor, I said, here's an opportunity to do all the great things that we did while I was chief in the city, and affect even greater change for all the residents in Orange County, all the residents and visitors. So that's how I made my decision. And I was a resident of Orange County for 28 years. This is where my kids grew up. It really made sense to me, and I care deeply about this community, and I knew that it has to be the right fit, and we have to have a person who's qualified to be sheriff. And I thought that my experiences in the city of Orlando and at the Orlando Police Department made me best qualified for that position. Now, so that's why I made my decision, and I had not run a campaign before or elected a position before. So that was a learning experience for me. I learned a lot, and you know, part of that comes with you know, I was always at events and always at different things as chief, and so that you go to a lot more things as an elected official, and you know, there's raising money, which is, you know, no one likes to do, but you know, running a campaign takes money, and so sometimes it's hard for a person like me who considers himself a humble person to ask for help and ask for money for a campaign.
Right, right. Yeah, I can imagine it's kind of a grueling process. And I did see that you are definitely going to be up for re-election again, that you're going to keep going. And
Absolutely.
I mean, because this was like a half term anyway, right? So you
Right,
definitely want to go in and make that impact.
Correct. Deming's you know, left halfway through his term as sheriff, so my term, this first term as sheriff, will only be for 2 years, and then in 2020 there'll be another election, and then that will be for 4 years.
Okay. And I did notice that, you know, looking into all of the things that you discussed that were important to you, one of the things as Orlando chief you tried to do was like reduction in crime and use of force incidents and officer-involved shootings. And, you know, you and I were talking earlier, and of course I mentioned how I'm a huge fan of law enforcement. I totally believe in each officer that's out there and doing something that I could never do, because I know that it's a very selfless type of job and position, and I have utmost respect. But I also, of course, have compassion for, you know, those who were involved in senseless shootings, where, you know, I know that there are times where we don't have all the facts and things don't look as plain as on black and white, but when we do have video of things on black and white, it makes it really hard not to feel frustration and even anger when you see, you know, officer-involved shootings where the victims are the ones that are pretty much the ones that lose their lives and, you know, have no quote-unquote justice. So I was wondering, though, with, you know, social media and us kind of seeing a rise of more things on both sides, like we got to see, you know, the body cams from the officers so that we can tell both sides of the story, but it feels like there's a huge divide between citizens and law enforcement. And I asked Jerry Demings, now Mayor Demings, the same thing about how can we bridge that gap between citizens and law enforcement, because, you know, I grew up not in fear, but in awe of, you know, the shiny badge of the police officer. I grew up in the, you know, early 80s where, you know, it was, you know, the officers came to your school and you had the utmost respect. And now, you know, it's frustrating because, of course, law enforcement doesn't garner the same respect amongst different generations. And I feel like there has to be a nice way to kind of bring all that back together. It's not going to happen overnight, but, you know, you're in a position now where that's something I'm sure that's on your mind every day. So what do you feel like you, as the sheriff in Orange County, can do to kind of bridge the citizens and law enforcement?
Well, and you're exactly right, where our community needs to trust law enforcement. And, you know, I recognize that a long time ago, and we have to continue to build the trust. And so, you know, I tell our deputies that every conversation doesn't have to start with, can I see your identification? Can I see your driver's license? How about saying hello to someone? How about waving hi? And we have to continue to be out there to interact with our residents, and especially our youth. So my mission to our deputies is that every day I want them to somehow touch the life of a child. And that could be a simple conversation. That could be playing sports. And so we do many different formal community engagement activities. So you'll see us do the coffee with the cops, and we read to young children. We play midnight basketball. We play flag football. We have a police athletic league. You know, we pick families during the holidays to give presents to that may be in need. But beyond those formal interactions, I tell our deputies sometimes those informal interactions mean a lot more, and I tell them you'll know it when you see it. There'll be an opportunity for you to interact with a resident, a business owner, or a child, and you need to take advantage of that. And one of the stories I tell them is that, you know, there's this, sometimes among some, there's this feeling out there that, well, once, you know, these these kids get to a certain age, they're just going down that path of doing wrong. And I said, that's not necessarily true. And I tell them a personal story about myself where, I thought I was at a young age, a teenager, going down that wrong path. And my geometry teacher told me, you know what, John, you're smart, straighten up. And I listened to him, I really did. So us in law enforcement in this position of authority and looked up to by some really can have an influence on our residents and especially on our youth, and we need to use that to our advantage and really try to continue to build that trust. And so I'm out in this community a lot, and to me the overwhelming feeling that I get is that people know we have an incredibly tough job, that they know that we have to make incredibly tough decisions in a matter of less than a second, and that they understand that. And then they also understand that we make mistakes, and we're human. We're going to make some mistakes just like you would make mistakes. And unfortunately, sometimes the mistakes we make are critical. So it's important for us to be accountable and show transparency when we do make those mistakes. And unfortunately, sometimes that comes with some very tough decisions for a law enforcement leader. We're talking about an officer or deputy who may have made a critical mistake, and it all happened in the blink of an eye. And they're just like everyone else. They have jobs, they have kids, they have mortgages, they have bills. Sometimes it's a very tough decision to terminate or discipline an officer, but sometimes it's very needed as well. And so that's my message to the community, that we will engage with our community more than ever before, probably more than you saw growing up. But when we do make those mistakes, we're going to thoroughly investigate them. We're going to be transparent about it. We're going to hold our deputies accountable, and then we're going to tell everyone about the outcome of the investigation. And I think that showing like body cam footage of the good and the bad really shows that transparency and accountability. And I will say that I think law enforcement has changed since I've been here. I've been doing this almost 3 decades, and I will say that I think there's this feeling among some that officers and deputies and people in law enforcement will just back each other up and really not hold each other accountable. And I will say what I always say, that I have found that the officers and deputies I deal with, that they are not going to risk their own livelihood, their own careers, to cover up the misconduct of another.
Okay, yeah. And, I've talked to other law enforcement on this podcast before, and we get into really deep conversations and everything. And so I've been fortunate to kind of learn a lot. And we often talk about, maybe these transparencies you're talking about, maybe if like the public understood a little bit more about the thought process that an officer has to go to. For example, like them actually seeing a situation and what they really perceive and believe may actually be the case, in which, of course, we don't know. We don't know what's in the mind of an officer or what's happening or the perceived threat, but maybe understanding the agency's use of force continuum and how that all works, and so that perhaps civilians should understand a little better what the escalation level is like, so that citizens can know, okay, look, if I'm in a scenario, here's where I know I need to be, like on this safety zone or something. Like, what is your thoughts on that, or what is your agency's use of force continuum?
I'm glad you brought that up, because talking about how citizens can really understand what we do, because we do offer a civilian police academy where it's 13 weeks long. It's 1 night a week for a couple hours, and as part of that, they'll go through a ride along, but they also get to participate in an interactive simulator, and where the civilian has to make the decision, shoot or no shoot, or try and talk the person into complying with their orders. And we've also put the media through that as well. And the ones that I've seen, the people are like, wow, I didn't realize that I would do that. I didn't realize how fast it happens. That's why I tell people that, we realize you don't have the training or experience that we do, but why we put people through those simulators is we want you to see how quickly it happens and how your reaction time relates to the scenario going on. So I'm very proud of the actual use of force policy, both that we had at the Orlando Police Department and at the Orange County Sheriff's Office, and the way we handle those complaints. And I will tell you what, having the body worn cameras has been an eye opener and has really helped us. And I tell the deputies this all the time, and they believe this, that more often than not, the body cam footage helps the deputy kind of explain, like, oh my gosh, that's what they were dealing with, and that person actually pointed a gun and shot at our deputies before we fired upon them. So I think having good policies in place, good training, a good internal affairs section, and holding our deputies accountable, but also being transparent with that body cam footage, I think helps along.
Was there a lot of resistance? Because that's kind of not new, but relatively like where, okay, many agencies are pretty much putting it into place, like this is going to be mandatory. Now, was there a lot of resistance from a lot of people that maybe you've worked with, or had certain feelings towards it?
No, so the only slight resistance that we received when, back when I first started as chief, we were one of the first agencies to test out body-worn cameras. And once the officers knew that they didn't have the camera on for their entire shift, that their personal conversations with their partner, or that them eating at a restaurant, all wasn't going to be captured, and they weren't having this big brother follow them all around, that it would just be used for when they were doing traffic stop, or when they were talking to a victim, a witness, or a suspect, then that's when they needed to turn on. They were fine with it. And as we transitioned from the test phase into going full time and everyone having a body worn camera, we would show them instances of people alleging abuse, alleging excessive force, alleging theft, alleging conduct towards the public, and then really positive outcomes of video that actually did not show that, and actually cleared the officer of any wrongdoing. I think the more the officers and deputies saw that, the more they really bought into the fact. And a lot of times, when people are being recorded, they're on their best behavior, right? What they say, what they do. So that also goes for the public. So many times we're able to de-escalate a situation just by saying, I'm recording this entire interaction. And then you hear, oh, I'm sorry, and many times it really settles things down.
Right. Except for the crazy people we see who are already on their social media live filming something that they're going to start shooting at officers, that we just actually saw in Orlando a few weeks ago, which was crazy. But luckily, like you said, the other body cam basically showed like he was shooting at everybody first, and thank goodness nobody was injured. But I mean, I find it absolutely insane that you can just like turn on your Instagram or Twitter and then you see all of these live interactions. I mean, you've kind of gone through an era where, we had VHS tapes, so there was no way we would get such like immediate, play-by-play review. Like, what is that like for you to be able to kind of step into this era now where things are so immediate and so in your face, and all of these interactions are just public to quote unquote everybody, and it's
so it's been good and bad. In some cases, people are able to do Instagram Live and Facebook Live, and people are watching this in real time, where many times those videos are not turned on in time, and sometimes the videos we get for the public are out of context in some cases. And law enforcement, the way we're set up, we're not able to put out our videos that quick. So a lot of times there's a video released that maybe was taken from a cell phone, and there's a lot of anger, and rightly so in some cases, about some interactions, and then it's a day or so later where law enforcement says, well, let's watch the entire body-worn camera video, and then people are like, oh, I didn't realize that it happened right before that. So in some cases, and in some aspects it's been frustrating for us. But now, especially the officers and deputies coming on now, they live in this age of, I mean, we're all on video, right? We got, you know, license plate readers, there's cameras all over the place. Every time you walk into a Publix or a 7-Eleven, you're on camera. Everyone's got cell phones, you know, everyone's got Ring doorbells and Nest devices at their houses. So I think in this age coming up, everyone knows they're on camera already. And I do believe that in part that has made a safer society. And you do see crime reductions throughout the state and really throughout the nation. And I believe mostly because everyone's got a cell phone, everyone's got video, all the cameras, and it's really hard to commit a crime or do wrong without being caught on video.
Right. Basically, yeah, somebody's gonna videotape it for sure. And you know, kind of going back to what we were talking about before about like citizens really having a better understanding, because I'm not that I didn't have faith in you before, but it's really assuring though to hear that you really feel that people should be held accountable for their actions, especially even if they are an officer, that there's not some special code like you see on TV where, you know, nobody tells on each other, no one rats each other out. And because it has been disheartening and frustrating for those who have lost family members to senseless shootings. And, you know, I don't actually believe an officer gets up at the beginning of the day and says, oh, I'm going to go shoot someone, or, you know, I'm going to, you know, be racist and I'm going to go shoot people. I don't think that's ever the intent, but the fact is it does happen. And so my question, because I'm a martial artist trained, I'm thinking, does there need to be more training? Is there, you know, not enough where they're, you know, trained in these high impact situations that are more prevalent because there are more guns on the street and more people who, you know, can hurt police officers for them to have that fear? Like, it is a little different. They're, you know, I don't know. I mean, how do you feel that the training process is? Do you feel like there should be something where there's like a higher level, or do you feel like it is just case by case? Or I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Well, as far as but going back to your statement about an officer waking up, I use that same statement every day. An officer or deputy doesn't wake up and say, "Hey, I'm going to have this interaction and I'm going to do this." You know, we really. Sometimes are put in some very, very difficult positions. So I have been very impressed with both training at the Orlando Police Department when I was chief and in my career there, and then at the Orange County Sheriff's Office. And we train at both those agencies more than the state minimums. And so what that means is, if the state says we have to, you know, use our firearms for, you know, 8 hours, we're double and triple that. Or same thing with defensive tactics. But what we also do, besides all those training scenarios and things that we do that are all the tools on our belt, and the impact weapons and the pepper spray and the batons and the firearms, what we also do a lot of training in is de-escalation. And, you know, I think, you know, years ago, when I started, especially, you know, anyone who may have been in mental crisis, you know, we were probably a lot quicker to go hands-on in those situations, where now we're putting all of our officers and deputies through crisis intervention training. And that's basically tools on how to deal with someone who is in mental crisis, who has not taken their meds. And really, you're seeing it, and you could search, you'll see all those videos as well, where officers and deputies throughout the nation are actually talking to people. And I'm talking, you know, for like 45 minutes,
wow.
You know, getting them to drop the knife and to step away from the edge of the bridge. And you see those videos all the time. And I think it's because of the mentality now that we can de-escalate these situations, especially dealing with people who are on drugs or in mental crisis. And not all the time, you know, because sometimes people who are suicidal, sometimes they become homicidal, and we've seen that before. But really trying to de-escalate situations and not force something that could become tragic.
Right. And, you know, earlier you talked about a really cool program, which I think I want to do actually. We do a ride along and you go and you learn all of these things, and that's great for citizens who are very interested in doing the research, getting hands-on, really trying to, you know, be introspective. But the majority of us out there aren't as motivated, driven. I don't have time for that. And, you know, we talked earlier about, you know, policies, and I feel like perhaps as citizens really understood better what basic rules of engagement were on, I mean, not even from personal just for themselves when they get pulled over, but also so that they can understand the process when they do make judgments, when they see things online or when they see shootings. Or do you think that's something that's important, or is there like kind of a forum or something that you feel that should be out there for? I think each agency is different. Is that correct? Like the force continuum is different for every agency, or is it
I would
pretty
say
general?
the agencies, especially here in Central Florida, we're all kind of about the same. We report use of force and all about the same. And most of the agencies here in Central Florida are accredited. So outside agencies are spending time looking at policies and looking at training, make sure that we have the best policies possible. And unfortunately, that's not the case throughout the nation. There's over 800,000 law enforcement officers, 17,000 different agencies. Not all of them are accredited, and not all of them have the best policies in place. And so I think for the people in Central Florida, it's good to know that very progressive and professional police agencies here, all accredited by outside agencies, and all have great training and great policies. And going back to the idea of what should I do if I'm pulled over by an officer or deputy, we do different town halls and forums for that, but that question comes up a lot. So something I did in the city of Orlando is we put out like a kind of an informational video of this is what you do when you're stopped by the police. I had those conversations when my boys were growing up and they got their driver's license, but not everyone has the luxury of having a law enforcement officer as a father to tell them what to do. So we're going to do that again at the Orange County Sheriff's Office. You put out some kind of informational videos, and I tell people all the time, to follow us on social media, Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, and you will learn a lot about not only about law enforcement, about how we interact with the community and how we do things, and a lot of the things we do don't always make the news, especially a lot of the positive things we do. And we do a lot of positive things in this community that people should know about, and one way of seeing those positive things and outcomes are by following us on social media, because we like to tell our own story, because we know not everyone does.
Fair enough. Kind of along those lines, I was wondering what other community service programs or interactions, and like, is there a police liaison for the community, things like that we don't know about that people might need to hear about and want to know?
Yeah, so we do so much. The Orange County Sheriff's Office has an app with a lot of that information on that. So download the app, follow us on Twitter, follow us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram. All those community events, like Meet the Sheriff events that we're doing, and different community forums are all posted online, and you'll see all the different programs that we do, the books and badges where our deputies read to kids, small children, the Police Athletic League where deputies are involved in coaching and sports, and the Coffee with the Cops, and all those different formal engagement activities you can learn about by visiting us on social media or going to our website, and our website as well, ocso.com. We have the link to how you can attend the Civilian Police Academy, and that academy, you would really get a first-hand look at what your sheriff's office can do for you, what we go through.
Right. And how long is it? It's like
13 weeks. But
13 weeks.
But it's only one night a week. So for 13
That's
Tuesdays.
Quite a commitment, though.
Yeah, 13 Mondays or Tuesdays. Yeah.
I'm not going to commit to that on air, because that's
Okay.
I don't want to be held accountable. But wow, but I am very interested, and I do think it is. Maybe you guys should consider doing like a shorter, like a weekend seminar or something that way. Well, that's more bite-sized, so people will actually.
But you know what? That's a good idea. Just
sign up, and
knock,
you'll have
knock
more,
it out in a Saturday,
like
8-hour day.
You have like, okay, let's like, and then it's like you're going to be tired by the 6 hour, and it's like, this is what fatigue is like at 3 a.m. when you're on that shift.
But I did the podcast, because now you just gave me a great idea.
Yeah, but selfishly, I'm like, well, I think I can commit to one day. I don't know about 13 weeks.
No, but you make a great point.
Right, yeah. So one of the fun things I like to ask, because I ask my cousin all these sorts of questions, and he just rolls his eyes at me. But when he first was in the academy, he said probably the worst thing for him was the pepper spray in his face. So what was the worst thing for you, or how does it feel to be pepper sprayed? Is that like, does it bring back bad
Yeah, I've been pepper sprayed, and I've had a taser used on me, and,
Okay.
and so the reason we do that in the training is so the officer or the deputy can feel the effects of that, because in the heat of the moment, when multiple officers are coming, or if a suspect would happen to get one of your weapons, you really need to know what that feels like and fight through it. Now, it's not a very pleasant experience, but the body will not go where the mind hasn't been, and or where the body has been. So it's important to feel the effects of that, and know that you can beat that, you can fight through that, and survive.
Yeah. Did you cry?
Oh yeah,
You wouldn't be human. I think it's like a biological, like it's
Yeah,
an actual response.
It
like
is a
human
response. There's no way that you will not tear up if you get pepper sprayed.
And he told me there's all these different levels of the spray. Like there's like the higher end, like if you're a officer or something, you have to be sprayed by like the more intense spray or something. And I was like, okay, the civilians training doesn't have to do that, right?
No.
Okay. Fair enough. And just out of curiosity, I mean, what would you consider one of the most dangerous, like real life situations that you had to be in?
You just on a day-to-day basis for deputies out
No,
there?
you specifically, like
Oh.
from your career.
There were many, but
Yeah.
the one in particular is I responded to just a regular off-duty job. I was working at a bar, a restaurant, and I stumbled in on a robbery, and had to take some action there. And the people were armed, so that was very nerve-wracking and scary.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, that's where you hope that training kicks in and adrenaline, maybe in equal shares, right? But
And it really does, yes.
yeah. So, is there any advice that you would give to, is this the type of career where, you guys are always trying to recruit more people? You said you still go to North Carolina to recruit because a lot of the military, but I mean, is it something where you see a high number of recruits, or do you feel like the industry is going down, or like?
No, so we're recruiting all the time, and part of that is because we have to keep up with attrition. There's always deputies retiring, but we're also always adding because, as you know, this is a fast-growing area, and it continues to grow. So we need more deputies, but we have about 6,500 people every year apply to be Orange County deputies, and obviously we're very strict on our guidelines as far as the background and drug use and arrests and things like that. So not everyone makes it through that process, and of course we have to take diversity into account. We want to reflect this community, so we can't just hire all white males. We want to have females. We want to have people from different cultures and different races, so we reflect the community that we live in, and that helps with that building trust. So there's plenty of people who want to be deputy sheriffs, but we're always looking for more to join us.
Okay, and what would you say, to somebody who is interested, but what is the biggest piece of advice that you would give them, or perhaps that you were given when you were starting your career?
I would say that we look at several different things. Education, get your education, go to college if you have the opportunity. Go into the military. You see it served me very well. Volunteer, get some life experience. So learn a different language. All those are things. So I would say, like, the most qualified applicant that we see has college, has military, has volunteered, is bilingual, and that's a tough person to beat. So you have to make yourself as most qualified as possible, and there's a lot of things that you can do. Like I said, you can get your education, you can volunteer in your community, and don't get discouraged if you're not chosen by that first department or sheriff's office. If that's really what you want to do, and it's meant to be, the cream always rises to the top. Somehow you'll get in.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and final question, just because I know you are, running again for sheriff, and we're rooting for you. What is the major thing that you hope to impact for Central Florida? Because 2 years is just such a short amount of time to get anything done. What are you really hoping to get done in that next term?
So I want to continue a lot of the great things that Mayor Demings had started in the sheriff's office, and then build upon those and bring my own spin and a lot of the great things we've done in the city of Orlando and to all of Orange County. And some of the neat things we're doing at the sheriff's office is we're really adding some more staffing, and we're we're trying to be a little bit more efficient with our staffing and creating different sectors and zones so that the areas that the deputies patrol are smaller areas so they can have a greater impact. We have a real-time crime fighting information center right now, and so what I mean by that is in a room like this at the sheriff's office, there's a video feeds and computer screens, and there's crime analysts and detectives in there, and they're watching this crime come in real time, and they're directing those resources. So I want to build upon that. And then lastly, I really want to continue a lot of the things I did at the city as far as engaging with our community, all those different formal and informal community engagement programs, and to let people know that we really are trying to engage with our community, and we think it's important, and I think the community would agree.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Sheriff Mina, for your time. I know you've got to run along and protect us and get to work, but we really appreciate it, and thank you for being on Culture Chat.
All right, happy to be here.
That's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening to Culture Chat, and hope you enjoyed the conversation. Please subscribe and rate my podcast. Feel free to leave me suggestions or send an email to mimi@culturechatpodcast.com, or follow me on social media at Sifu Mimi Chan on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook.